to slow down. So I say we jump right in and people can join as we get started. So um, I'll kick us off today. So my name is Ryan Karapis, and I am the marketing director at QualiPro. And on behalf of everyone at QualiPro, as well as our partners at Agronomic Advisors, Jeff Corcoran and Dave Del Sangro, and our partners over at Bloom Golf Partners, Tyler Bloom, we are very excited and proud to launch QP2U. Hopefully, many of you are aware of some of QualiPro's recent initiatives and just trying to get more involved in the industry and give back to the industry. And this is one additional way that we feel that we can do that, and offering unique access to some of the industry's best, like you see on the screen here today. And so we really hope you enjoy the content and engage and stay with us throughout the entire series. But we're really looking forward to what this is going to bring to all of you. And so before I hand it off to Jeff to kick things off, at the end of the session, as things wrap up, we'll take a live Q&A. I guess all that I ask is throughout the entire session, feel free to put questions in the chat. And then at the end, continue to put any questions you have in the chat, and my team and I will field those and ask the panel. So looking forward to your engagement, and I'll kick things off to Jeff to introduce today's group.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. And thank you to QualiPro for giving us this platform to be able to bring these guys together and hopefully tell some stories, impart some wisdom. And the impetus for this was that 2025, I have the opportunity to travel around the country and see different regions of the country and how people manage their golf courses. But the overarching theme this year was that 2025 was brutal, especially from the Midwest, Northeast, down into the Mid-Atlantic and other regions of the country. It was a difficult year. So bumps, bruises, and turf loss lessons from 2025 kind of got us to this point where we have three guys that manage turf grass at an extremely high level and in probably one of the worst areas of the country is to grow grass. So with further ado, I want to introduce our panel, or ask them to introduce themselves. Kyle Steidel, why don't we start off with you? And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so thanks, Jeff. Kyle Steidel, I'm the golf course superintendent here at Caves Valley Golf Club, located just north of downtown Baltimore, Maryland here. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from Ohio, and, I had the pleasure of working with a good colleague here in PBL for quite some time and over at Muirfield Village, and ultimately led me to come over here into the Mid-Atlantic at Caves. So been here now for 8 years, and, I can't say there's any one year that I felt like I've had a normal year, but 2025 was certainly one for the books. So happy to be here. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, it's great. Paul Latshaw, let's hear your story.
Yeah, I'm Paul Latshaw. Basically, I got my first superintendent's job here at actually Marion. I was 26 years old and didn't know what I didn't know, and I still don't know what I don't know. But very fortunate for that opportunity. Left to go to Oak Hill, where Jeff and I worked together. I was there for 5 years at the PGA Championship. And then I went to go work for Mr. Nicholas at Muirfield Village. Was there about 14 years, did obviously the Memorial Tournament and also the President's Cup. Then had the opportunity to come back to Marion for the restoration and some other reasons, and did the restoration in 2018. And that's my story.
Yeah. Last but certainly not least, Pete Wendt.
Thanks, Jeff. So my name is Pete Wendt. I'm the director of golf courses and grounds at Congressional Country Club. I had a pretty neat start in the industry because my first internship here in the States as a Penn State student was working for Paul's dad here at Congressional in 1995. So I was part of a big team. We hosted the U.S. Senior Open that year, and just a lot of great people in the industry, a lot of guys who are still in the industry working for Mr. Latshaw at that time. And from there, I just decided I was dumb enough to move even further south and went to Richmond, Virginia, and built the first bentgrass golf course that far south, and was there for about 15 years, a place called Kinloch Golf Club. Then made my way back up here to the DC area to Woodmont Country Club, another kind of big property, 36 holes, and then back here to Congressional in 2018. So about 8 years here at Congressional.
Awesome. Well, thanks, fellas, for being here and taking the time out of your day to talk about this topic. Certainly appreciate it. So let's hop in. Pete, why don't you continue on? In your mind, 2025. I know there were some different factors for you that we're going to talk about, but like, what made 2025 so bad or so difficult in your mind?
Well, it's funny, Jeff. It was like a tale of 2 months. I mean, it really was. And I tell people all the time that maybe the hottest week of the year is always the last week in June leading up into July 4th. It's one that can catch a lot of people off guard. So that's when you always have to be ready. And it started that week with a lot of rain. And then we had, I want to say 300 or 400 plus degree days in a row that just kind of started baking everything in sight. It was interesting because from the end of June until the end of July was, I would say, one of the toughest summers I've seen in the golf business. But then it's funny, August may have been one of the easiest Augusts I've ever seen, and we needed it, right? I think all of us would say if that weather kept up, who knows what the summer would have been like for everyone up and down the East Coast. But I would say, Jeff, the big thing was it was hot and wet. I sent you some pictures earlier of flooding on the property. I mean, we had 2 massive floods during that time with water sitting all over the property. And look, it's so localized, right? You can be 2 miles from another club and you haven't had rain in 28 days, and they've caught 5 or 6 little 1/10 of an inch or 2/10 of an inch, and that makes the difference. And the difference for us was a couple big floods and then just a lot of water and heat. So you really had to be on your game this summer.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. And we're talking regionally about the Mid-Atlantic, and it seemed to be pervasive throughout we'll call it that northern half of the country above the Mason-Dixon line. And apologies to the guys in the South that might be on here, whether you guys had difficulty. I didn't happen to get down that way, but if it was in Kansas and out that way, and it was difficult all over. I mean, Paul B., what were your experiences with 2025?
Yeah, it was definitely in the top 3 or 4 hardest years. I think a little bit like Pete said, I mean, the year started off wet. I think we had like 13 inches through May through July. But the big thing, and since tracking dew points, we were basically the 3rd highest dew points for a period from June 1 to July 15th. So basically 70%, we were like, what was it? 45% of the time we're above 70 dew points. And, we were tropical and we're growing all cool season grasses. So, chemistry wasn't holding up. I mean, if you thought you're getting 14 days out of any chemistry, regardless of who it was, you weren't going to get. So you had to tighten up your intervals. And then really, like Pete said, we all got lucky. August was relatively easy and we got drier. And if that pattern were to continue for another month, I don't think there was anybody that didn't have some scars and some bruising and greens thinning and areas. So one thing I know about the Mid-Atlantic area is that it's not easy, and every year you don't know what normal is. So it just seems like every year we keep breaking records. The wrong records.
Yeah.
I want to have cool ones.
I think sometimes you make some up, because every time I talk to you on the phone, Paul, it's like, we're setting records this year. I'm like, it's been cold as hell this year. What kind of records are you setting? It's hard, Cork. Just tell me it's hard. You know what I mean? So, you're the record setter for sure.
Well, no, so, you track record, and I've got all these apps. And all I can tell you is I know I'm hotter than Steidel's place.
Oh,
like 0.03 one year. So I rub that in.
Yeah, you got to.
But we all know, Pete, you're the crazy one where you're at growing grass in the Congo. That is a very, very challenging place.
Yeah, Steidel's in the tropical kind of cool weather. He's, just south of the Arctic Circle up there in Baltimore.
Yeah, question where you pull your data from, PBL. 0.1 degrees is a little suspect.
So, Kyle, how about you? I mean, I know these guys did a pretty good job of anything you want to add about the summer of 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think to piggyback a little bit off of these guys, the start of the season wasn't very good either. I mean, you look at April.
Yeah, seriously.
Very cool coming out. I mean, if you're growing POA, it was prime POA. And, going from very cool, very dry to a very wet May. Typically where we're building some root strength for the season, we really just didn't have. And so as you dive into the summer and, obviously the early onset of the heat and humidity and rainfall makes it challenging, growth patterns were all over the place and trying to, more or less manage fertility was about as crucial as disease pressure as well. So, that, and then, obviously we hosted the BMW at the end, which, add a little factor to the challenge of the summer.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good segue to what my next point was going to be. And we're going to dive into some agronomics and things of that nature. But, Pete, kind of circling back to you, you and Kyle both hosted tournaments in 2025 as well, on top of the normal membership play and the amount of rounds you guys pump through both places, Caves and Congressional. Like, what factors did the tournament affect into like how you managed overall and how it affected going into the summertime? Because you had an early tournament, right? Senior PGA this year.
Yeah, it's interesting because the one thing you worry about with, first of all, newer grasses is waking up in time for a spring championship. So, of course, we had the place jacked up going into May, and then you have to deal with that for the rest of the summer. So rough was very pumped up. It's interesting. A side note on that is when summer patch started rearing its ugly head in the rough this summer, you could almost see exactly where the rope lines were from back in May, from the additional foot traffic. You could almost just walk the line and say, okay, this is where all the foot traffic was from the champ back in May. So yeah, it was, we were really lucky. We had great weather that week, and there's not a better time to host a championship in the Mid-Atlantic than the end of May. And then poor Kyle, end of August after the summer we had, I don't know how you did it. Kudos, hats off to you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, it was every day you wake up and you just tell yourself that try to not do anything stupid, and it's incredible at how easy it is to say and how difficult it is to perform that measure. So, really the idea is defense, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And like I said, plant health is king. And our target was to go as deep into the summer as healthy as we possibly could. And obviously, as we got closer and closer to that to the event, we started to turn the dials a little bit, but try to refrain from stacking maintenance practices and really just try to keep it as simple as possible until we got up to the event.
Yeah, and I agree with both you guys. Is that from a standpoint of heading into an event, sometimes like the overthinking and not doing something is just as important as doing something. There's a lot of truth to that. Having done both May tournament and August tournament, I would take the May tournament every day and twice on Sunday, even in Rochester, New York. There is no question about that.
I agree.
But Kyle, a quick question for you is going through the summertime and knowing that you had to play defense, and we're going to talk about a lot of those defensive measures, but anything from your membership coming back to you, like, hey, Kyle, can we get the greens faster on a day-to-day basis? I know you had a lot of guest play heading into the event.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were very upfront with our communication early on in the season that with an August event, we had to do everything we could to present ourselves. And, we're coming off of a restoration project in 2023. So the golf course was still pretty young. We put in some restrictions for, like fairway landing areas. We had, the players hitting off mats or taking it out of that particular zone that we would highlight. But yeah, I mean, the expectation doesn't change. They want a championship golf course. And, in the Mid-Atlantic, there's always seems to be about a 2 to 3 week period where it's like, hang on. And so when, there's different measurements that sort of dictate when that timeline is. And, it sort of seemed like at the end of June, it was time to, pull the reins back and, go solid rollers and raise heights. But, you generally just try to be, communicative up front and while you're out on the golf course, obviously seeing people out there, they generally get the sense of what we're trying to accomplish. And, I think despite the summer, we had a pretty successful event. And as you get on the back end of it, if they didn't understand before, they certainly did after the fact. So,
Yeah, that's great. I mean, appreciate that. Hey, Paul, you have the 2026 U.S. Amateur coming up, and having some experience with that event. That is another brutal event that falls in, like that second, third week in August. And I guess what lessons did you learn in 2025? Knowing 2025 was a tough year. How is that leading into your preparations when you're thinking like in the wintertime for your agronomic planning and how you're going to go into 26?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Kyle and I are really good friends, and I always go down to Caves just as much as possible was down here for the week because his tournament was the same time as ours. So, and our climates are very, very similar. So for me, it's a little bit about playing defense. And sometimes I get a little stubborn and I hold on a little too long because, you worry about, membership and guests and you want the experience to be great. And probably this was a year where maybe I didn't pull the reins in a little bit sooner than I should have. So, we will be defensive. I think the biggest thing for us is, we got a great membership and we all know, I mean, there is no easy championship, but the U.S. Amateur is brutal. I mean, it's a 10-day event and the field's 156 players and individual caddies. And, we got really small greens. So, we follow suit with what Kyle did closing. We're going to close the golf course down for 2 weeks because that's our biggest thing is, greens are very, very small. You got one way to walk on and one way to walk off. And the traffic management is, the thing I'm the most concerned about. So, obviously anytime you do these events, you hope you get lucky. I mean, I just don't want the rain Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. That big of field, you get an untimely rain, some sun comes up and that water's hung up in that top quarter inch. And, some of these greens just don't have a lot of pin positions. You take a green like 13, it's 3,500 square feet, but it's only got really 1,000 square feet of pinnable area in the same area. So, I think the biggest thing is, like Kyle said, keep it simple, but also don't be stubborn because every year, I fight not make going to solid rollers and every year we have to go. And I think we're just going to be calendar based. We're just going to say, get to July, make the changes, concentrate, plan health, communicate, hey, we're not going to have the greens rolling 12 and a half, 13. And the data that we do is, we do really a lot with GS3 and the Deacon and document in the last 3 years that our numbers are the worst at that time. It's not that we don't try. It's we're given what the defense is allowing us to do. We're making efforts to try to focus on plant health. And, the USJ wants US Open conditions at a very difficult time. And we're going to do the best that we possibly can. So, we'll see. I think it's probably in my opinion, I think it's the biggest challenge of my career as far as tournaments and championships.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there for that statement. Well, I mean, I think that gets us to the point where we kind of like maybe dig in a little bit more to the agronomics and, like I think each one of you guys have said it. And, in my travels where I see people getting in trouble is not playing defense, and the key word being defense before they know that heat and that stress, or when that heat and that stress or rainfall, whatever it might be, humidity, before they get into that difficult time of the year, they're not putting good defensive measures in place. And, there's a lot of factors involved with that, right? From a standpoint of, membership expectations and what's going to happen. And so I really kind of wanted to look at some of those defensive measures that you guys do in that geographical area to just kind of really tee this up for a good conversation. So the defensive measures, like let's go back and start with Pete again. Pete, I've got a list of them sitting in front of me. So, I'm kind of curious, like what you feel the most important defensive measures, like when you head into the summertime, what's Pete Wendt at Congressional doing?
Well, first of all, and I'll agree with Paul, is that's why we have so many good young guys and gals working with us that can hold us back when we're making stupid decisions. And you've got all those people in the room who can say, hey, I think it's time, let's go. I mean, it's smooth rollers, right? We're we're kind of calendar based. Once we get to July 4th, we're going smooth rollers. The one thing I saw in my travels with colleagues this year, and needle tining, venting, etc., has been big for people for years now. And we didn't needle tine or vent once through the summer, and I saw some properties that did, and it really took them backwards, as opposed to some years it's the best thing you could ever ask for. I think the pressure was just so high from a heat and moisture standpoint that anything you did could set you back. And it's really hard to do nothing. And that's the thing I've learned over the years is I think nothing is sometimes the best answer. Our gold course is very pocketed. It's very tree lined, not a lot of airflow, not a lot of sunlight. Water sits back there. We switched to triplex mowers on our outer 9 fairways back there in the summertime. I think that helps with the lightweight mowers. And it's just, I guess the easiest thing to say is spray, spray, spray. Keep the water as few and far between as possible, right? As much as you can to keep it alive, and be careful. The other thing I'll say is when we talk about green speeds too, and I think, look, unfortunately, I'm getting older, and I think the more years you get under you, the more you realize, man, I was pretty adventurous in my early days and really pushed speeds and everything else. And a wise man once told me, not many guys get fired for having healthy greens, but a lot do for having dead greens. So, chasing speeds in a summer like this, it can be a nightmare. I mean, I really set my ego at the door this July and just said, look, we're going plant health until the weather breaks. And I think that helped a ton.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, I don't know, Tim Morgan or Paul, one of those guys told me, like, early on in my career, there's only two things that happen fast in this industry, and that's turf loss and job loss, right? So, like, playing those defensive measures certainly helps. And Paul B, how about you? Like, what are your defensive go-tos when well, you know what? Sorry, let me put a pin in that for a second. Is that, you guys have all touched on it a little bit, with solid rollers, but a lot of times I visit places and people have some, like, opposition. And Paul, you said, you're always doing it too late, or in years where you haven't put the solid rollers on. I mean, Paul, what do you feel is that, opposition to putting solid rollers on? I think I know the answer, but I really kind of want to hear it from your words.
Yeah, I mean, just look at mower setups. And Jeff, that article you wrote a while back, if you haven't read that, I encourage people to read it because it's really good. You take the Toro mower and you've got shim settings and everything else. So we start the year off with a pretty aggressive bed knife attack angle, like 6.5. And this year, when we started getting into it, and I didn't start making changes to July 11th. I lowered it down. We're very fortunate. We have a phenomenal mechanic. Robert Smith is unbelievable. So we started backing off, and so we took the bed knife angle down to 5.5, and then finally we put on solid rollers. So you're always tweaking your mowers to make sure you're getting through the tough part of the year. But it's just not that stuff, because the most detrimental thing you do to grass every day is mow it. Like those Hudson mowers, they became a staple when we refer to our triangles, where your approach ties into your collar, and it's all weight. So these little push mowers, you send them out, and as soon as we started doing that, and we started that pretty soon, because those have always been problematic. So reducing the mechanical aspect of things. Other things we'll do is, where the fairway units tie into the triplex areas, we'll start walk mowing some of those areas just to reduce mechanical. We don't do it all year. We just do it when it's a tough time. So, mowers. And then I would say, obviously, fan, we're lucky we have a lot of fans. Portable fans helped out a lot this year with air movement. The precision areas are great for the moisture management, plant protectants, and the water management. I mean, it's everything. If we can control our moisture, if we didn't have untimely rains, not that this business is easy, but be a hell of a lot easier to control your destiny. It's always those untimely rains. And it's always funny, the misconception, you get a rain and everyone's like, oh, you must be happy you got a rain. I'm like, no, I'm not happy it rained. Don't get me wrong. You get like 6 weeks and you need to flush greens. You can do that, but we've got the means for irrigation and making sure that you're trying to keep it as dry as possible. But then also making sure the TDRs are great for teaching, but sometimes younger guys get in the fact where they're looking at numbers. And in August, well, guys, where the roots at? The roots are coming up. So, that number, if you could dry it out to a 7, you might not be able to dry it out to that. So you might have to go from a little bit more of a syringing, type thing when you get to that middle of July to get to August 15th type deal.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like I'm in full agreement with you that I wanted to like, and I hope he's watching this or gets to see it, but I wanted to chest punch Andrew Green when he put these, in I'll take some of the blame for it. Those little triangles between the green and approach, they get the collar and approach traffic, they get the double cut traffic, they get the roller traffic. Those are some of the most challenging areas during the middle of the summer. I agree with you on that. Kyle, how about you? Like your go-to defensive measures when you start getting into the soup?
Yeah, I mean these obviously Pete and Paul spelled it out pretty significantly there. But I would say like one of the biggest things we really pay attention to is the effective height of cut, right? Because you can manipulate height of cut, you can manipulate front roller, bed knife angle, what have you. The one thing that I think is sort of understated is just what that effective height of cut is, right? Because you may be mowing at 100 or 105 in June. Now, as you get deeper into July, the root structure starts to compromise a little bit. August, your mower's starting to sink in a little bit more. It's a little bit tighter cut. So I think certainly understand where the effective height of cut is. Knowing when not to mow, right? It was a wet year. So I usually use, depending on timing, an inch rain. So if I'm coming in one morning, we got over an inch of rain. Typically, we're not mowing that next morning, and try to again communicate what the expectation would be for the greens that day. But really trying to just hone back on doing things just as a means of providing a green speed. Certainly isn't a driving force as we get deep into the summer.
Yeah. So there's a few different things, and we got a lot to talk about as we go forward because there's still more to hit on in this particular area. But like in my travels, I think that everybody talks about the aggressiveness and things that they're doing, but like two areas that I see pretty frequently where, and maybe it's two or three, but areas where guys get in trouble is that not understanding their greens mowers and their greens mower setup. I think that there's a lot of issues there, and then fertility is another aspect that I see where a lot of guys get into trouble, especially as it pertained to this year. Paul, you gave some great stats on humidity. And then I'm going to add one more quick note to this, and it's going to lead to some questions. But I saw anecdotally this year too, just with the amount of rainfall, that in a lot of areas, there was a lot more difficulty with, we'll call it USGA greens than there was the standard pushed up greens. And you guys all manage, some form of USGA greens. How was it for you guys this year on a USGA green? And Paul, I'm going to start off with you. Like what, and you manage both because you have the West course that's, they're pushed up POA bent, which is a great dichotomy. If you could kind of lean in on that topic a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, USGA greens are great when you get these untimely rains, and we're very, very fortunate to have the subsurface with the precision airs that we run vacuum every day, and we chart all this stuff. The softest green and the wettest green on the golf course on the East course is a large putting green. It doesn't have it. Everything's the same drainage, same everything else. So, with the data collection, we water to 3-inch TDRs. We collect data off the 1.5 inch and also 8 inches. So we're constantly looking at what the bottom's doing. Because a little bit like, Jeff, you're a wrestler. Well, you're a better wrestler than I am. We proved that a few times. But, where the head goes, the body goes. And where the bottom goes is where the top's going to go. So, it's all about drying out that top. So, the moisture management is very critical, and also water quality. I mean, we've got really high chlorides and sodium and bicarbs. Last year, we didn't do it this year. We actually did soil testing every week and also tissue week and twice a week. Not that I knew the calcium or the phosphorus or potash was going to move, just to see what the salts were doing. Because by the time they come back and they start getting the levels, then you're like, all right, we've got to basically, put down calcium wetting agent and acid to flush those salts through. So USGA green for that aspect is really good for managing, bad water quality. On the East Coast, we have bad water quality.
Yeah. How about Kyle? When we lead up with you, same question.
So yeah, I mean, I think, certainly tracking your moisture is huge. The other thing, collecting data on like your fertility, right? I think one of the biggest things that we get caught up into now is there's so many data points, and I think the worst part of it is we can get lost in that data, but if we really don't understand how to use the data into formulating what we're doing out on the golf course, I think is where you can start to get lopsided a little bit. Much like Paul, we're fortunate to have the precision air units as well. But the one thing I know we noticed this year is, we sodded greens back in 23. And so for us, it took us, a little bit longer of a time to dry out, especially that top quarter inch where that sod layer was just kind of hanging on. And so, we would utilize, whether it was venting or, the Planet Air system, just to try to open them up and then run, suction along with those practices typically, helped us dry these down. But, that we got so many different tools that, mark out measurements that we can utilize. I think it's just very important on understanding what that data means and how to utilize it for different practices.
Yeah. Pete, you want to talk about you start getting it in the summertime with the heat and the humidity, the rainfall, and kind of what everybody experienced in 2025. Talk about how you approach fertility as you go into the summer. You're managing bentgrass, on USGA greens. How do you go about that? I mean, I see a lot of people get into trouble with fertility, primarily too much, but also too not really accounting for the mineralization that occurs during the middle of the summertime. I mean, how do you approach your fertility?
Sure, those bugs are moving, right, when it's hot in the soils. So that's one thing you have to watch for. Look, I think if you asked us all 20 years ago, if we were collecting clippings and measuring clippings on a certain number of greens on each golf course, everyone in the room would tell you no. I mean, now on a daily basis, we understand how much growth we're getting. I mean, 20 years ago, it was like, hey, how much grass do they get? No, not much. Oh, maybe a little more than yesterday. But like Kyle said, we have a lot of data these days. But the one thing I tell, especially, look, the younger you are, the more tech savvy you are, and the more you're into the data. And one thing I tell everyone is look, especially in the mid-Atlantic where the three of us are growing grass, is the grass is talking to you every day. I mean, and you have to be out looking at it and smelling it and figuring out exactly what it's telling you. And sometimes it's telling you, hey, hit the gas as hard as you want. And other days it's telling you slam on the brakes. And this was a slam on the brakes year. And just being able to get out there and talk to the guys who are on the greens every day with hoses and really figure that out. The other thing, like when I look back on this summer, just what I would call not a missed opportunity, but let's say we were planning on a gypsum application on a Monday or even wetting agent applications. Look, you can't manage off of a calendar or a spreadsheet. I mean, with as wet and hot as it was, a lot of those were skipped. And did it hurt plant health? No. If you missed your vitamin D for 2 days because you were out of town, do you think it's going to kill you? Absolutely not. Right. And it may have helped.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point. And, definitely want to hear, Kyle, because I know you and I talked about it a lot this summer. How about you? Fertility impact on what you do in the middle of the summertime?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've said it 100 times. Keep it simple, right? And you get to the point where you start to see growth sort of unprecedented and in some regards tough to check up. It's really about what's in the tank as you're spraying, right? I mean, there's oftentimes we don't think about the small little benefits you get out of an individual product. For instance, we'll use an amino acid product that maybe has a little bit of nitrogen in it, and while it's a little bit involved in that product, if it's involved with another product you're kind of getting more than you're probably bargaining for. So I think really, fine tuning or dissecting what you're putting in the tank week after week or bi-weekly, whatever it is really big. And, my approach this year, because we hadn't quite, we're coming off of a growing year, was let's try to lean these bad boys out and see, see what kind of performance we can get out of them without, necessarily the mechanical inputs. And, we kind of got it to a point, it seemed like as we're getting to the tournament where, they were almost asking for it, which is really what we were trying to accomplish is, you spray something, see a response, not not the other end where it's, okay, we're due for a spray. Let's put some fertility in here, what have you. It's really, let's try to get these things to talk to us a little bit and feed them as needed.
Yeah, and you guys did an excellent job of that this summer, that's for sure.
Jeff, if I could add one.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, absolutely.
Is when we're talking about fertility, and I think Paul B sees the same thing, is I had to kind of relearn a little bit of fertility based on the sheer amount of traffic as well. Like I spent 15 years at a golf only club with very few rounds. So, we did 15,000 rounds a year. And then I come to a club that's daylight till dark every day on 36 holes. And the number of members and caddies, they can walk the grass off of those greens. So at times, there's just not one prescription for every club, right? Because at times they need a little bump just to help recover from all that traffic and keep you at level set.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. Each golf course is going to prescribe its own fertility to a certain extent. And I was going to ask Paul about this because I know we've talked about it a ton. Is just sometimes I see guys make some mistakes with longer chain fertility, and they pay the price for it in the middle of the summertime. I mean, Paul, you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I know we've talked about it a bunch.
Yeah, no, Pete and Kyle both talked about it really well. And, obviously, like Pete said, clipping yield. I mean, that is something you sort of looked in the bucket and you sort of now we do it all the time, and that drives everything. So our fertility, we try to keep it as low as possible. I think this year right now we're up to like 2.2 pounds on USGA greens with low CEC. So we do the fertility based off of the centers, but there's many times that we'll do what we refer to as a differential fertility. Just like Pete said, they'll walk the grass right off the green. And so you've got areas like take number one, everyone takes the bag to the back left, and that left side starts getting beat up. So recuperative potential. So we might go out with a spray bug and spray like 100th or 200th of nitrogen just on that area, just to make sure the exit areas are staying healthy. Because, so we almost have, in some regards, two fertility programs. One's based off of, the putting surface, and then one's based off of on and off areas. So, yeah, I mean, but like you said, like Pete said, and Kyle, the clipping thing drives everything. And we know if we get to like 10 ounces per thousand, that we better start looking at doing some differential fertility. And then we also know we have a lot of nitrate nitrogen in our water, and with humidity, you're sequestering all the bugs. So we go from, I try to put no nitrogen in the tank in July and August when it's that hot, and just sort of we're always something like 100th or 200th, but we're not dropping a 10th in the middle of summer. Definitely no long chain reactions. I'd rather spray 3 times and micromanage it than try to make one big one and then regret it as the dew points are higher and all the stuff's being sequestered in the soil.
Yeah, I mean, just fortunate enough in the travels to see that, like this success rate with guys that have, and Pete talked about what we were doing 20 years ago with certain products and things of that nature. But it seems like there's become, with guys that are managing very successful, and it doesn't matter, it's irregardless of regardless of their budgets, is taking these fertility plans and making them more simple. The plant doesn't know if you're spraying just a soluble urea that's, $20 a bag versus a 2.5 gallon jug of a boutique product that's $120. And I've seen guys get way simpler. And I think that as guys evolve and manage more, they kind of realize that sometimes those products, you don't always know what's in those products. Is that a fair statement?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, look, keep it simple, like you said. I mean, you've got urea, you've got ammonium sulfate, you've got manganese sulfate, magnesium sulfate. I mean, those four alone are kind of the staples of our program, and then you move from there. And look, we're all going to use some boutique products, but that's kind of the main part of the ingredient.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And just that, we talked about defense and we've been all over the place. And so I'm going to go through a list and just kind of, if there's anything you guys want to add to this, but we talked about, knowing your mower and your mower setup. You guys talked about, angle of attack, like in Kyle and I talked about this summer too, is that, one thing is understanding the geometry of your mower, right? Is that sometimes there's a roller and a brush and like how far that front roller is out in front really affects the aggressiveness of what you're doing. There's a lot of different factors as far as the setup, and there's probably a whole hour-long conversation just about mower setup at some point. You guys hit on it real quickly, but Kyle, Paul had mentioned before about taking plant protected intervals as you get towards that crazy part of the summer, and shrinking them down. I mean, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it with both the plant protectants, the fertility, rather than going out with big slugs on longer intervals, tighten the intervals up and, even means tighten the intervals up and go a little bit higher rate with plant protectants. The one thing that probably was the most I've learned this summer was the use of growth regulators and utilizing the Greenkeeper app. Stacking growth regulator applications on tighter intervals, or what's too much versus what's not enough, just on a percent basis. That app really helped me sort of hone in on our regulation, and then like these guys talked about, seeing how that affects the performance of the turf and whether or not it felt like we need to fertilize or what have you. I think there's a lot of different factors that play into it, and certainly going tighter intervals gives you a lot more flexibility to make adjustments, right? Again, if you're getting to an every other week application, whether it's fertility or plant protectants, you may not be getting the coverage you need on that 12th, 13th, 14th day, and tightening it up, whether it's 7 days, 10 days, what have you. I mean, we've switched from a 14-week or 14-day program to a 10-day program on our fairways. And, we were in the middle of a gap when the early onset of the heat and humidity came at the end of June. We had to make an additional app just to make sure we were covered. And so I think just understanding how the intervals, how the weather plays into the efficacy of your products, certainly tightening up on those intervals helps with flexibility.
Yeah. And so, we talked about utilizing solid rollers, obviously. And I think that, Pete, and forgive me, I don't know this about your program, but I know Kyle and Paul, and obviously you guys are fortunate from a budgetary standpoint, but you guys employ solid rollers on fairway units in the summertime as well, correct? Yeah, and Pete as well. I mean, Paul, you want to hit on that a little bit? You employ solid rollers in the summertime on your fairways?
No, we don't. But
Okay.
But we did this year at leading up to the amateur to see exactly what would potentially happen. Because, thought is if we're mowing fairways 10 days in a row and not taking a day off, the mechanical stress that we might do it. I think it's going to be a judgment call. But, I don't think we compromise anything. If you're mowing every day and you got your groomer slightly in, we did it, I think, for 2 weeks, just to have the knowledge base to feel comfortable versus trying to do it right in the middle of the amateur and not feel comfortable.
Yeah. And I think that the point with that too is Kyle, you did solid rollers on your fairways and greens through your tournament. So, I think that sometimes there's a misnomer out there that maybe you can't achieve high level playing conditions with solid rollers on, but you did it throughout your championship.
Yeah. And I think it's getting back to understanding the effective height of cut, right? I mean, if your effective height of cut for a fairway unit, say you're mowing at 425, but your effective height of cut's 350, with groove rollers, understanding when you jump up, and we see it year after year when we go to solids, that 450 or 425 mowing, we go to solids, tightens up real quick to, 400, sometimes even 425. And so as particularly as we got closer to the tournament, rather than going up in heights, we started going down, knowing we had a little bit of security with those solid rollers. So I guess the long and short of it is just pay attention to the effective height of cut and how the setup really dictates that aspect.
Yeah. Pete, Kyle hit on it earlier. And it's one thing we haven't really spent a ton of time on. I know this is a wide topic, but use of PGRs through the summertime, right? Everybody's using PGRs, but I've seen people use them in not such a good way. And I've seen people like Kyle this summer who absolutely nutted the use of PGRs. I mean, what's your approach on PGRs as you're going through like the heat of the summertime, July? You know what I mean? Like, what's your approach on that?
Sure. I actually saw a question about that. What do you do in the summer? Do you back off? And I think that's the time you need them the most, right? Because, the soils are releasing all that nitrogen and you've really got to slow down that growth. So I think summertime, it's super important. I mean, our program right now is mostly primo and anew, and I'm pretty happy with it. And it's tough, right? Because when you start managing growing degree days and thinking about it from that perspective, you've got to be able to pivot. And with the sheer amount of play we have, we don't pivot as much. We have certain days that are going to work better than others. So, we're pretty much weekly on greens and close to bi-weekly on fairways.
Yeah. Yeah. And that you talk to a lot of people that are still not using growing degree days for the use of their PGRs. And personally, I think that Bill Kreuser's research on PGRs, starting to employ growing degree days was probably one of the most influential pieces of research that influenced how I manage grass and how I utilize those things in my career. I mean, Paul, we talk about PGRs all the time. I mean, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we use a greenskeeper app, also, but the one thing I would say is we don't follow the degree model when we apply. In our programs, we spray on Mondays, do soils, chemistry 1 week, biology the next, and every week there's a foliar spray. So what we do is, we'll look at what the projected curves are and we'll tweak our rates. And usually the primo is the one that we will go up and down on. So we'll be messing with that. But, there was times, we were probably 60% regulated on the graphs, and we start off with primo and anew. And then when we get into June, Kyle and I've talked about this forever, we start using Cutlass. And I don't know what it is. It could be Cutlass, it could be TGR, but that chemistry of the PGRs really helps to subside some of the summer solstice disease where you come in, you start seeing atiliation. And, so that goes into the program. We don't take, and it's light. It might be the water soluble packs like 2.5 ounces per acre. And then, new, we're using the old and new. I forget the conversion. I think we're using like 2 ounces of that. And then anywhere like a tenth of primo. And then there'll be times we'll get stacking a little bit and you start looking at, the clipping yield's going down, and it's not just, they're all going below 10. Then we'll start backing that out a little bit. So, I mean, the PGRs, I mean, obviously it's an art, but the science with the growing degrees and just seeing how you're stacking, you've got to be aware of it. And more so for your callers and your triangle areas. Because what we do, the greens, we do the approaches, just like probably everyone else on this call.
Yeah. It's, if anybody's listening to Sam Green talk at all, I mean, he talks about I don't know, I'll probably get the names wrong, but Einstein and Picasso, right? I mean, you got the data, but there's still an aspect where you need to be out there and be a bit of an artist. You got to be a grass grower. And I think that intermeshing those two in the middle and being able to have the stability to make good decisions in the middle of summer and sometimes reel yourself back a little bit. You know what I mean? And as far as PGRs and how that relates is that sometimes you got to play around with it a little bit, and understand kind of what's happening.
That's well stated.
Sorry, go ahead.
You think about what Watson said, agronomy is a blend between science and art. And, we got all this data and that's the science, but there's still the intuition of looking at it. Like Pete said, you're looking at it, you're smelling it, you're touching it, and that's the art side. And that just takes reps and years of killing grass. I mean, if you do it long enough, you're going to kill some grass.
Yeah. And, I mean, it's and it's aside from the budgetary factors. I will tell you that probably some of the best greens I saw this summer were on a golf course that was probably, I'll call it, well, there's two mid-level budget golf courses that had phenomenal greens. And those guys they were good agronomists, you know what I mean? And those greens rolled, 12 or 13, and they just did a really fantastic job with it. So, I know that you guys come from the higher echelon of clubs, but I mean, all this stuff holds true. It doesn't, regardless of budget, you know. I did want to pivot a little bit because, you guys have commonality in the fact that you guys, in the Mid-Atlantic have all done renovations and Pete, I want to start off with you. You came into Congressional hot and you guys, blew that place up. I mean, and I guess I really want to talk about, the impact of those renovations on how you manage and like, did it help you get through 2025? And what was the impetus for those renovations? I kind of want to go around the horn and talk about that a little bit.
Sure. And I think we'll all have very similar answers, but
Mhm.
number one was when we were going through the renovation itself, I said, I don't care what the drainage budget is, and I don't care where we end up. We ended up with 47 miles of drainage on the property between 2-inch, 4-inch, et cetera. And look, that's what's going to save you in a summer like this. I mean, we saw a big difference in fairways on our blue course compared to the gold that's old POA that has a lot of bird baths in the fairways, and the drainage systems just aren't in place similar to the blue. So drainage is number one. I think we've all leaned on each other to talk about, okay, what we're doing with greens mix as well, right? And I think we've gotten so good at 30 years ago, we didn't talk about CU. We didn't talk about firmness. We talked about, okay, does it fall in the USGA recommended guidelines? Whereas today, I mean, we're talking about, okay, how firm do you want this mix? Where's your cap and non-cap water, and where's a good balancing point for that? And then perk rates as well. And we have so many factors that we can manage as we go through these renovations. The other thing is irrigation, right? I mean, our irrigation systems today, we've all walked the golf course with our irrigation consultant and put a flag in the ground for every head on the property. And just having the control that we have today that clubs didn't have, and some clubs still don't have, in the areas that you can water and can't water and turn the water off. It's the amount of areas that you can hand water today compared to the past. I remember some nights out here at Congressional as an intern with single row popping quick couplers in the middle of the fairway with impact heads on them. So life is a little better today.
Yeah. Do you have anything in your project that you wish you did that you didn't do, or do you feel like you kind of got done what you got done?
Oh gosh. I mean, there's always
Oh, Pete timed out on us there.
something you
All
wish
right.
you did, right? But that
Yep.
would be fun. But I mean, all of these new systems we have their work. I feel like I'm pretty happy with where we are today, but you're always working to improve. I mean, we're out there working on projects on the blue course now, and we just opened it in 21. So it's never finished.
Yeah. Kyle, how about you, buddy, with
Yeah,
your
I mean,
renovation?
you could argue that the sole purpose of our renovation was wrapped around, just water moisture management. Both with the greens and, like Pete mentioned, the greens mix. We got pretty down into the weeds as to what the spec of the sand was, and the organic material, what have you. But the fairways. I mean, we put in, shoot, I think it was 10 miles of drainage in the fairways alone. Largely targeting landing areas. We were on a pretty tight timeline to get the project done, so we had to sort of highlight exactly where we wanted to go. But moisture management even was integrated into some of the design work. I mean, we have a natural stadium setting. I think Fazio is pretty popularly known for that, and so even out beyond the playing surfaces, you look at ways to divert water around the surface. Green surrounds often, whether it was a bunker or a mound. We try to put in swales and get the water away from the surface before it could cause any problems. And then we were fortunate with the precision airs too. I mean, those, while they have the aspects of heating, cooling, which is certainly helpful at different parts of the season, I mean, being able to manipulate the soil moisture is, more than crucial, especially when you start to add in, heat, humidity, high dew points, high nighttime temps, what have you. So, drainage. I think if I was to do it all over again, I'd probably triple, if not quadruple, the amount of drainage we put in.
Yeah, that's a good point. Paul B., what do you have to say on the topic as far as your renovation is concerned?
I mean, Pete and Kyle, they basically covered it. I mean, most of well, obviously we rebuilt every aspect of the golf course, but a lot of the stuff's below the ground and it's not sexy. Membership doesn't see it, but it helps you get through the difficult parts. We only did 20 miles, so Pete, I'm going to put in for more drainage. 47 miles. Man, oh man, I'm a little jealous. New shocker again, and 47 miles of drainage. We have to step up our game here. We're going to laps. But the goal, Mr. Bradbeer, the president at the time that really got this going, the goal of the club was to narrow the gap between our worst time of conditioning to our best. I think we've accomplished that. And it's the stuff you do, the infrastructure, with the drainage, the irrigation, all those things that, all contribute to the golfing experience. And when you have these tough summers like we've had, I mean, I look at the West, we're hopefully going to do something over there, but, we had some problems with some of the fairways and we just don't have drainage. And it's just, you need infrastructure. You need these tools to succeed when you have difficult summers like we have. And one thing I didn't really talk about this year on our POA greens, their native soil on the West course, it was a terrible year for summer patch. I mean, we battled it. I mean, this is the worst year I've ever seen for summer patch on POA greens. So we talk more about the East, but I just thought this was, from a disease point of view, it just seemed like nothing was working, throwing a kitchen sink at it.
Yeah. As it pertains to your guys' construction and methodology, any of you guys should know this probably, but variable depth? Any of you guys employ variable depth, Pete?
We did. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we didn't get crazy. We went kind of 10 to 14. We had one green, the largest green on the golf course that kind of was 3-tiered, works its way down to the bottom, and we were 16 at the bottom. But for the most part, it was somewhere in that 10 to 14 range.
Yeah. I think that's a valuable, you're talking water management on bent grass greens in the summertime. I mean, variable depth, if guys are looking at doing any type of construction going forward, definitely look at it. It's a valuable tool that can be employed. I think there's a lot of great research out of Michigan State that kind of points that direction. I don't know if you found that, 4 years post-construction.
I definitely have.
Yeah.
It just balances it out a little better. And, Jeff, one thing we didn't talk about, I wanted to talk a little bit about, look, the three of us are all managing new grasses, right? And they bred these new grasses for heat. And I think one thing that we need to start steering back toward is they wake up around the same time that our Bermuda grass tea wakes up in the spring. Right? So when you talk about the amount of play in the spring, the amount of traffic in the spring, and just the different methodology of managing these new grasses, it's very different.
Yeah,
fantastic, and they're fantastic in the summer, but they are very slow to wake up.
Yeah, I think that there, is a funny little anecdotal story, and I'll move on. But Paul and I went down to, take a look at some NTEP trials at Rutgers, and this isn't a knock on Rutgers because it's a great university and you do a lot of good research there. But, we went down there and their bent grass green trial, their bent grass cultivar trials that they had going on. I mean, at the time of year we got there, it was covered in dollar spot. And Paul and I were looking at each other like, I mean, when's the last time you saw a dollar spot on your greens? It's been a long time. Like, who the hell cares about dollar spot? We're looking at, the problems that we deal with traffic and, like, how's it, when's it going to wake up in the springtime, heat stress, all this other stuff. And, making sure you drill down on the metrics that you really need for your golf course, I mean, when you're looking to choose a variety and a variety selection. But Kyle, I think you had a point about variable depth, and then we'll kind of move on.
Yeah, I mean, we ultimately did not. Largely, I didn't know how with the precision airs it would perform, so we opted out.
Mhm.
That and our contractor and our architect opted against it as well. But there were certainly certain greens like front of 14 or number 11, which is pretty temperamental throughout the year. That certainly in the lows, an extra couple inches of mix definitely would have helped. So I think if I were to do it over, probably something I would integrate into.
Yeah. Well, it's 4:03, and I want to leave some time for some questions out there, and Ryan Kroppus is going to be kind enough to kind of lead in some questions for you guys. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Ryan, and if I don't get a chance to talk again, but I just want to thank you guys for taking the time out of your schedule talking about this. Love picking your guys' brain. I could do this for like 4 hours, with the exception I'd have to look at PBL for 4 hours. But outside of that, we're good to go. So Ryan, I'm going to turn it over to you, buddy.
I appreciate it, Jeff, and appreciate you, Kyle, Pete, and Paul. That was great, and just can't thank you enough for your time. To everyone in the audience, please type your questions in the chat. It looks like we touched on Ian's question around PGR usage. So if anyone else has any questions, we can field them from the chat now. So please don't be shy.
Hey, Ryan, I did see one come up that, and maybe we'll start off with Pete on this, but that came up about staffing. You know what I mean? Brutal summer. You guys, a lot of hours on hand hose. I mean, what do you do in regard to your staff? I mean, like, how do you manage your staff when those guys are crunching hours?
Phew. It's tough, right? I mean, I think the captain of the ship has to be the calmest guy. When you hit the iceberg, you have to be the guy who's saying, "Hey, look, we're going to get through this, and we'll sail off into the sunset." But I think you rely on the fact that you have really good people working for you who all have the same goal as you do. It's to get through the summer and put out a great product for your membership. I don't think there's any magic sauce for it. As simple as that sounds.
I think it's something to be said about in this industry that you got to have a grind gear, right? And when you start to get into these periods of the summer that a quick team meeting, hey guys, this is not ideal. It's going to suck for a couple weeks, but we're going to get through it. And I think if you give them the mindset that it's going to be tough and that you're ultimately in it together, it typically pulls everybody through the toughest times.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts with people, and I think multiple times that you bring in interns from different places, and you say adversity makes you better. If summer, I don't care if you work at any place in the Mid Atlantic, you learn a lot. I mean, it was a challenge, and just as challenging this year is. Last year was completely different. It was hotter and it didn't rain. I mean, which I'll take that all the time. So you're on hoses forever, and you try to rotate people out, make sure you get the weekends and stuff like that. But it's mental fortitude. I mean, if you want to get in this business, it's 7 days a week. It's agriculture. Obviously you can schedule people off, but when you're in the big boy chair and things are going bad, it's your ass. So I don't know, just you got to grind through it. It's mental. It's mental. We signed up for it. You got to be a little warped to do this, but we all love it. Pete, you're the one that's most warped being down there in Bethesda, Maryland. I don't envy you. That is a very, very challenging area.
Oh, we're all in the same boat, buddy.
All right, we have a few in the queue here. So, how do you guys find a relation between soil temperature and disease in turf?
Oh, I mean, obviously you're doing, a lot of your subsurface applications for root dysfunction diseases, take all, summer patch based off of soil temperatures. But I think when they're, I would say in a USGA green more than a native soil green, soil temperatures follow ambient air temperature a lot more because the sand's dynamic. So you're just going to have to realize that, some of that stuff is being decomposed and broken up by microbes that, any subsurface chemistry, you're just not going to get that long. So you just got to tighten up your intervals. I don't know if that's, what do you guys think?
No, I agree.
I
agree. It's early season and late season when you're talking about PRD, take all, etc. It's timing those sprays out, and then look, we're unfortunately we're spraying through the summer. That's it. And there might be days when you're going out ahead of a storm or after a storm with a swale spray when you sprayed 5 days ago.
Yeah, well stated.
This next one is for Pete. Pete, what did you do for fertility on fairways leading into the event? They were spectacular. Amount and type of fertility as well as type of regulator and fairways.
Well, it's interesting. So type of fairways, they're a 007 match play, 50-50 blend. We did a November ammonium sulfate poultry product at 0.5 pound of N. It was a 10-2-5. Put that out in November, and it was crazy because we haven't done that in a while. And it held color through into early winter like crazy, and then it woke up so much earlier than other years. And we didn't have a ton of N on them going into the season itself. We like to keep the fairways fairly lean. Most of our fertility on fairways was through a spray tank, whether it be a touch of ammonium sulfate or urea. And growth reg wise, again, we were talking primo and new, and we just tighten those intervals up when it comes down to the time of the championship. And again, like Jeff said, a May championship is really easy. What Kyle had to do and what Paul B's about to do next summer, that's night and day. We had the junior PGA in 23 in August, and it was a 10-day event. It was terrible. It was a terrible time to host the championship. Like just the amount of stress that goes into it. And again, not to give you more stress, Paul, but I know you're going to be thinking about it from today until August. Like, look, the great thing about a spring championship is it comes quick and it's over quick.
Well stated.
All right. Okay, here's a good one. As a new turf professional, what are the key things you guys would advise someone to do or to learn in order to become elite like yourself? That's from our friends down at Luling Sport.
Oh, I'm not elite. I'm lucky.
You know what? I was just going to say, you're calling these guys elite. That's the rough part right there.
I've been called a lot of things, but elite is not one of them.
Look, it's sometimes in life, you get lucky and you work for the right people and you have the right contacts. But look, we're all really lucky people. We really are. And those two guys right there you're staring at are very qualified and incredibly good at what they do. And that's why they're sitting in those chairs.
One of the things I use for recruiting, because obviously having interns are critical. And, we got 2 experiences with the West Course with the, native soil push-up greens, but, I push the climate. In the area that we're at, it travels well. There is no easy place in the world to grow grass. There's challenges no matter what. But I'm pretty sure I could be relocated to a lot of different places and I could figure it out. Pretty simple, because not simple, but there's always sets of problems. But this area here, the margin for error is just, there is none. If you start seeing things thin, you got to hit the brakes hard and then you just go in defensive mode. So it's a challenging area, but there's no easy place to grow grass. But this one will prep you pretty good.
I would say mentorship, investing in a place that has proven record of moving people on, and and giving exposure, experience to to places to grow your network. Whether it's hosting events or getting opportunities to volunteer. Really finding a good mentor that's going to invest in you and lend yourself to the business. I mean, go everywhere you possibly can, gain as much experience, and understand that the more challenging it is, the more rewarding it's going to be.
All right. Next up, we are in a similar climate as you and have had progressively more and more goosegrass breakthrough. What strategies are you employing to combat this on cool season turf?
I'm going to defer to Pete.
Look, this may be a simple answer, but it's, we spray a claim through the summer months on fairways and rough, and I think that helps out a lot. Just a small amount of a claim in almost every spray that we put out, and I think that's been a game changer for us. I mean, this is a very old property. Of course, the blue is a new property now, but the Gold Course, some of the holes on the Gold Course are original holes from the 20s, and of course, grasses have changed over time, but the property's been there for a long time. So, look, it's there's a lot of goosegrass in the soil out there, a lot of seed bank.
To add to that, I would, there's been seasons where I've done dimension apps on fairways and then followed up with the claim apps throughout the season. It's still, sometimes in some regards had breakthrough. So it's very challenging weed to control, but I think just lending yourself to utilizing different products and finding out what works best for your properties is best.
Yeah, we do the dimension as well. So yeah, that's hopefully getting us through the early part of the season.
Yeah, we just do a claim on our cool season fairways, but there's always a little bit of breakdown, especially a year like this.
Very good. When it comes to water management and wetting agents, is there a winning combination using retainers and or penetrants that promotes water infiltration and recovery in June or July?
I mean, I look at wetting agents as a program. I don't think for me, we start off, we use Excalibur and we also use Oars PS to move it through the profile. And it goes out every Monday in our soil spray. And we'll like, if we're getting in a wet pattern, we might up the Oars PS, but I look at wetting agents like anything else. It's a program you start at the beginning of the year, and they definitely help. And we've had good success. I would say, Kyle, with I know you use it and a lot of other people. That combination has been pretty successful for us. So, but I think it's like anything else. And fairways on the east, we also use Excalibur just because of all the drain lines we have, and having guys on hoses, it helps with the drain lines a little bit.
And I think willing to be flexible with whether it's a retainer or a pusher, just understanding what your weather is, what your weather patterns are. Like for me, we got to the end of July, actually pulled wetting agents, and advanced to the tournament. And it bit me in the ass a little bit on the back end, being that we had some trouble working moisture back into the fairways with how much we dried them down. But I think during the season, like Paul said, stand on a program and then certainly be flexible with your timelines, your intervals, and whether you decide to go more of a pusher or more of a holder based off of your weather.
Yeah, I would echo what they said. And third one to say we use Excalibur on greens, little different program. We're more a heavier shot every 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the weather patterns and rain, drought, etc. And then supplementing with some other products as we go through the month. But everything from even using some granular products on bunker banks or certain tee boxes, or even, bunker turns. We were talking about hand mowing. I mean, with our renovation, we've got a lot of bent grass straight into the bunkers. So we do a lot of walk mowing throughout the entire year up against those bunkers. And those are high traffic areas as well. So they may take a little more fertility and a little more wetting agent at times as well. But, I think on USGA greens for us, it's mostly about hydrophobicity, right? I mean, the water is going to move through that 12-inch layer. So it's about getting all of that hydrophobic soil to kind of take on water.
What's your communication to membership look like when the ball is slowing down during the defensive months?
Oh, you hide in the office. Look, I think it's communicating year round. I think it's communicating year round, but it's making sure your membership understands that every summer is different, and the fact that there's sometimes we're going to have to be very defensive, which was this July for us, and it's getting out in front of it. It's part of that is just driving around the golf course and talking to people, and it's that face-to-face communication, I think, is the best. I will tell you this: if I'm getting an email every week or an email every 2 weeks for an update, I'm deleting it. I'm not even opening it. I get enough emails as it is. So I kind of look at that perspective and say, if I were a member, would I be opening an email from Pete Wendt every week or every 2 weeks? And I would say probably not.
Utilizing the pro shop staff too would be another one. Making sure they're equipped with necessary information, because they're basically the first ones that see the member on their way in and before they tee off, and just follow up with seeing them out on the golf course.
Yeah, I mean, agree with both what Pete and Kyle said. We submit our data from GS3 and we present every month, making sure we're hitting standards at the Board of Governors and also Greens Committee. So, this was a year where I went in and said, guys, we might not hit our standards. We're in a point where, greens are thin here a little bit, and we got to really play defense, and framed it as, we're setting up for fall golf. I mean, the last thing we want to do is do something that's going to impact the golf course, and we don't have fall golf this September. So, communicating, and I think sometimes we're our own critic. You put the solid rollers on, and maybe, the texture gets a little bit worse and they slow up a little bit, and, you're beating yourselves up because you want excellence every day. And, some people know the difference, but then you can start using some of the pin positions you can't use when they're rolling 12.5 with some of the contours we have here. So I think sometimes, keep it simple. And sometimes I think we're our own worst enemy. I know I am my own worst enemy, because I'm never happy with the product. It's always like, we need to do better, so, the communication, and sometimes just live the fight another day.
Such an easy person to work for, Paul.
Yeah, I know. Well, you told me you stopped listening to me years ago. Yeah, you stopped listening to me years ago. And he gave me that big smile right there and just walked away like he's joking, but he was serious.
And then it looks like, last but not least for now, a similar question. So what are some tactics you utilize within your own staff to reduce stress, especially during those defensive times? Some of those internal comm strategies.
I'm just laughing because I know all three of you guys aren't decreasing stress. You guys are increasing stress.
I think calling a spade a spade. I mean, understanding you're under a stressful time, and it's okay to be stressed out, and understand that it's a team environment. It's not one of us versus the other. It's all of us versus the weather.
Yeah, and obviously communication with your staff, because it all starts there. But also just reiterating the fundamental practices. Like mowers, setting the mowers down gentle. Make sure you're using the boards. Move the boards in so you're deviating traffic, and really just make sure that we're doing those things. And a lot of times we change start time. I mean, we were starting at 5 o'clock in the morning, just to get the surfaces mowed at the coolest part of the time, even though it was 79 degrees when we came in the morning. But, to me, I think it helps. So you're not doing anything past like 8:15, 8:30.
And then thank you, Anthony, for resending that. I see I missed that now. For those of you using Primo, are those rates similar through the season, or is the rate moving up and down as you move through the season? Or are you adjusting both rates?
I think it was Primo and a new. Using
Oh,
Primo
yep.
and a
Thank
new
you, Jeff.
are those
Yep.
rates. Yep.
I mean, like I said earlier, with the growing degree days and the Greenskeeper app, we look at the chart of where it's at, and the pendulum will be, Primo and also a new, just to not get in, because there's times we were 60% regulated, which wasn't good. But the one thing we won't mess with is usually the cutlass. That stays at that rate. We might tweak it down a little bit. And then once we get to like September, sometimes we just drop out the cutlass and just go higher rates of Primo and no. But it's always fluctuating.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, for us, it's fluctuating, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
And getting back to the Greenkeeper app, I mean, you're able to see it on a percentage basis. So, as you become more familiar with it, you understand what percent is for performance, what percent is for plant health, and adjust accordingly.
If you were to restart your career, would you all have chose the same path of turf grass, knowing the challenges and obstacles that came with the job?
I'd be at Wall Street right now.
Yeah, I've learned that I'm not qualified to do anything else at this point in my life. So, but look, I joke with a good friend of mine who's in California now, and he's always like, I can't believe you're that stupid to still be in the mid-Atlantic. And maybe my path would have taken me to the mountains of Colorado or Utah instead of the mid-Atlantic. I mean, and look, it's hard to grow grass everywhere, but look, I'll give the mid-Atlantic group today some kudos. It's damn hard. It really is. I tell a lot of the people in my office on a daily basis, like, hey, if you can, go to a better locale for your next job.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously my father's a legend, Michael Jordan in the industry, in my opinion. So I started working on a golf course at 12. That's the only thing I know. Maybe if I didn't do this, wouldn't be the Navy SEALs because I can't swim for shit, but maybe the Marines.
I say sanitation, to be honest with you, Paul, but that's just me.
I mean, I think the unique thing about this industry is the relationship building. I mean, one thing we didn't talk about is the importance of, good counsel, whether that's through peer, communication with your peers, friends, consultants. I mean, the special part about this industry as a whole is just the fact that we're willing to help each other. I mean, this panel, talking about what we talked about with people, we don't know, quite frankly. And I think that's one of the unique things about this industry is just the relationship building.
Yeah, I echo that. It's such a humbling industry, and you think about it. You could pick up a phone and call a superintendent, and they're going to give you all the information because we all want to help each other out. And this is unique. It's a fraternity or a brotherhood, because we've all been humbled at one point. And when somebody's going through it, you try to provide support, and you're always asking people, what are they seeing? How are they doing things? Because there's always somebody doing something better. There's always somebody. I don't care what golf course. There's always somebody that's doing something better you can bring to your golf course and implement.
Agree.
What's your favorite aeration practice for fairways, greens, tees, etc.?
Top dress recycler.
I'll turn me on to that. It is if you got sand top dress fairways, it is the biggest game changer of any piece of machinery I've ever used. I mean, I just can't echo what it does. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And Kyle got one, and I sort of watched what he was doing. Then I bought one, and we exchanged equipment back and forth. But I agree with Kyle. I think that is a game changer.
Yeah, and look, I think we'd all agree the 648 kind of revolutionized aerification. I think that's been a great tool, and it's been a phenomenal tool for greens, tees, fairways, etc. And I'll just say also, I think there's not a better tool than deep tine aerification. I don't care how you're getting it done, but whether that's through, deep tine aerification or shockwave, etc., it's trying to get roots down, especially in our heavy clay soils here in the mid-Atlantic, is just opening up those channels on top of all of the core aeration you do as well.
I will say that I'm not old enough to understand the transition from what was before the 648. I mean, 648's outside of a few things. 648's pretty much all I've known. So not to date you guys. I don't mean to bring that light to you, but
Thanks a lot, Kyle.
Yeah, I remember aerifying fairways at Oakmont for my dad with the Ryan 24. I think it took an hour and 15 minutes to make one loop around 12.
One more just came in. What is the hardest part of your career been, and what did you rely on to get through it?
And for me, it was probably my first year as a superintendent, coming from Ohio into the Mid-Atlantic. I understood what tough times were, and quite frankly, didn't know what I was talking about until my first year into the Mid-Atlantic here. And kind of getting back to good counsel and working through stuff with peers, and quite frankly, trial and error.
I mean, I would say, every year has its own set of challenges. And me personally, I know other people have been there. When things are starting to go, you're in the Mid-Atlantic, you're going to have some challenges, and your greens are going to thin, areas are going to thin, and you're on pins and needles. You start second guessing yourself, and always go back to your principles and the KISS method. Go with your intuition. I think that carries you a long way. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but every year has its own challenge. And then when you do have issues, network, call colleagues, call people, because there's enough resources out there. You might have something that you're just missing. I'll give you an example. This was, I think it was last year. We had our bed knife angles on our greens really aggressive, and I asked Jim Rooney to come down. And first thing he said, "What the hell are you cutting at?" He's like, "These things are way tight." And then we started looking. Sure enough, sort of lowering the bed knife. We're just coming out of the gate a little too aggressive. So we're so close to it because we look at it every day. So like the frog analogy, you put a frog won't jump in a boiling pot of water, but if you leave him in there and warm it up, you can cook the frog. So sometimes getting just a second opinion and a different perspective, and networking with your colleagues. In the summer, I'm walking the golf course, I'm on the phone, and I'm probably talking to Kyle, or I'm talking to Jeff, or talking to somebody. What are you saying? What's going on? And because let's face it, the 90-day war it's a challenge in this area, and there is no such thing as an easy summer. There's always going to be something that comes up.
Yeah, I think these guys hit it. Look, I think just by luck, this is one of my worst traits that probably helped me succeed in this industry is I'm an awfulizer. And I mean, if I find a spot the size of a quarter that looks out of place, I think, okay, the whole ship's going down and we're done. So, relying on people to come over and look at your property and talk on the phone. I mean, all of us spend a lot of time on the phone with colleagues and just trying to figure out how to do it better and different ways to do it. I mean, rely on the people around you.
All right, I'll probably take this last one and then just to be respectful of time, we probably wrap it up after this. But what is your advice to someone looking for a job with different grasses? So example, transitioning from warm season to cool season.
I mean, I would say get work experience in the geographical area. Um, to get some knowledge base. And that's one thing, with interns and stuff, I encourage people to, obviously I like the mid-Atlantic area because of the challenges, but, go south, go different areas because the more experience that you're exposed to in the different grasses and ask questions. I mean, the information's there, just, I tell the interns all the time coming in, attitude and effort, everything else we can put in. If you want to learn, we'll teach you, so diversify and network. Talk to people that you think are doing really well growing cool season grasses, or people you're doing really well growing warm season grasses.
I would agree.
Very good. Well, I appreciate all of the engagement and questions. Those were all great questions. And again, thank you to our speakers and moderator. Really appreciate your time and insights. You have my contact. You have the Quali Pro contact. And if there's anything that we can help with, we hope to see you along this entire series and continuing to engage with us. But Jeff, do you have any last words? Are we good to go?
No, I think we're good to go. I think that again, want to thank Quali Pro for taking the for utilizing the resources to make this happen, and all your guys' engagements this last 2 years just with superintendents. Certainly appreciate your guys' commitment to the industry and the people that comprise the industry. So thank you to the people at QP for making this happen.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you everyone for the time and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.